Hi everyone.
say we are
Tonight we're going to talk
ruthless.
about a group of people who probably
But the
think of
sea
as
is
ruthless,
crueler still.
tough, full of adventure pirates.
You
But
think a
here's the kicker.
squall is
Despite
dangerous?
their wild lives
We
on
are
high
trapped,
seas,
and
there
the
was
freezing
one
air
thing
will
that
kill
could
us long
easily
before
send
any
them to
storm
Davy
or
Jones'
navy.
locker faster than a cannonball.
In these harsh conditions,
That's right, cold.
preparation
Ice.
is everything.
Unforgiving cold.
Pirates used
It
clever
wasn't just the
tricks
storms,
like this.
enemy ships, or treasure hunters that posed a threat. It was the freezing sea air. And I don't mean a chilly
Pirates
breeze
wore linen
while
shirts
you're
as the
sitting
base
in a
layer because of
comfy
linen's
chair.
moisture-wicking properties
We're
that
talking
kept them
about
dry.
life or
Keeping
death
sweat off the
conditions
skin is
out in
crucial
the
for
middle of
survival
nowhere
in cold weather.
with
Wool
nothing but
retains
your
heat
wits
even
and
when
what you
wet,
got on
which
your
was
back to
essential for
survive.
pirates navigating
So,
these freezing
you
waters.
probably
Its thick
won't
fibers
survive this
provided
one
warmth
without
no
some
other
clever
fabric could
tricks
match.
up your
Used as
sleeve.
outer layers,
Especially
oilcloth
if
and
you're
leather
not
offered
prepared
pirates
for a
vital
night in the
protection.
middle of the
Their
cold,
durability in this
stormy
harsh
ocean.
maritime environment
But
was
don't
key
worry,
to survival.
pirates were crafty.
They
They
adapted,
didn't rely on
using
fancy
whatever
gadgets or
resources
high-tech
they could
gear.
find.
No,
Every
they had
salvaged
systems that
garment
were
was
surprisingly
essential to
advanced
survive
when
the
it came to
harsh.
warmth.
There's no bad weather,
They had
only
to.
bad
If they
gear.
didn't find ways to
This
stay
coat is
warm,
our defense
it
against
was
the
lights
cold,
out before
just
they
like
could
those
even
cannons
plunder a
protect us
treasure
from the
chest.
enemy.
Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Oh, and drop your location
These snug
and
caps
local
protect
time
the
in
ears from the
comments.
cold.
Let's see how
Head
far
and
you
ear
all
warmth are vital
from
for
the chilly
survival,
seas.
preventing
Now,
frostbite in these
turn off
icy
the lights,
environments.
maybe turn
Humans
off the
lose up
fan
to
for some soothing
25% of their
noise,
body heat
and let's
through
get
their
started
head.
tonight.
Pirates
So,
understood
there
this,
you are,
realizing that
out
keeping
on the
warm was
open sea,
crucial for survival
traveling
at
the
sea.
elements,
These woolen socks
trying
were
to survive
essential
the kind
gear.
of cold that
More than just
creeps into your
comfort,
bones
they prevented
and doesn't let go.
frostbite and ensured
What
the
do you
crew
do?
could maintain
Well,
mobility on
you
the
could try
cold ship
throwing down
decks.
whatever's
Forget
lying
the
around.
doubloons, lads.
But
We
that's
found
not
the
gonna cut it.
real treasure.
Pirates knew that surviving
A
the
warm
cold
foot
wasn't
is
just
worth
about
more
luck,
than a
it
full
was about
purse
smart
on the
choices.
open sea.
Especially when
Woolen
it came to
socks
their
are
clothes.
vital out here.
And let me tell you,
Even
they
soaking
had a
wet, the
system,
fibers
not
retain
some
heat.
raggedy mix
We
of
prioritize them,
hand-me-downs
lads,
either.
because warmth, you
Pirates
might think
designed
one
a
pair
layered
is enough,
clothing
but
system
the
that
secret's
could have
layering.
impressed even
This
the
extra
most
wool
seasoned
traps the
outdoor
heat,
enthusiasts.
keeping your feet
At the
warm
base,
even in the
pirates
iciest
wore
waters.
thin linen shirts.
For
Yeah,
pirates,
sounds pretty
warmth
basic,
trumped
right?
style.
But here's the thing.
On the cold,
Linen was
unforgiving sea,
specifically
mismatched
chosen
layers and
because it
stolen
could rake
coats.
sweat away from the body.
Keeping the
And
head
anyone
warm
who's
was
ever
just
tried
as
to brave
crucial
a
as the
freezing night
body.
in sweaty clothes
Tricorn
knows how that's
hats,
a
often
fast
made
track
of
to
thick
hypothermia.
felted.
The
The tricorn
key
hat,
was to keep
with its
dry.
broad brim,
These
offered
linen
crucial
shirts were like
protection
a
from the
personal
lashing
bodyguard
rain
against
and
the
harsh
cold,
winds,
preventing your
essential
clothes
for
from
survival at
sticking to
sea.
your skin and turning every little breeze
All
into
right,
a
men,
personal icing.
cease the fighting.
Above that came
Grab those
woolen
coats
mid
and
layers.
boots. We'll need
Now,
the warmth against
wool
this
is often
gale.
associated
These
with
mismatched
itchy
rags
sweaters,
keep the
but
biting
let me
wind
tell
off our
you,
backs, and
this
that's all
stuff
that
was
matters.
magic back in the
Aye,
day.
better warm and
Wool's
alive
insulating
than
properties
fashionable at
are
the bottom
what
of the
kept
sea.
pirates from
To
freezing
survive the
death
cold at
in
sea,
sub-zero
pirates
temperatures,
repurposed
even
whatever
when it was soaking
materials
wet.
they
And
found.
trust me,
This
in those
adaptability
conditions,
was key
wet
to their
happens
survival.
fast.
This
Wool
canvas
could
makes for a
retain up
sturdy
to
cloak in this
60%
weather.
of its
Better than
heat-retaining
freezing.
power. That's like
Good
wearing
use
a
for the
blanket,
tattered sail.
even when it's drenched. And in pirate terms,
Pirates were
that's
masters
pretty
of
much
patching up
life-saving
worn-out
stuff.
clothing and
Then,
repurposing
the
old
outer
garments.
layer.
Nothing
This
went
is
to
where
waste
things
on
get
these
real.
ships. It
Pirates
was
didn't
essential
just
for
throw on
survival.
any old coat.
To survive,
leather,
pirates
oilcloth,
mastered the art of
you know, the kind of
repurposing.
fabric that laughs
This
in the face
sail,
of wind
patched
and
with
rain.
salvaged velvet
The
and
sea
silk,
wasn't exactly a dry place to be.
When temperatures
And when
dropped
those
below
waves
freezing,
came crashing
pirates would
over the
huddle
sides of
together
the
like
ship,
this,
soaking
sharing
the crew to
crucial
their
body
bones.
heat.
The
The
last
huddle
thing
effect,
you wanted
a
was
crucial
to have your
survival
clothes weigh
tactic.
you down.
By
Leather
minimizing
and
exposed
oilcloth
surface
kept the
area,
water
they
out
reduce
and
heat
the
loss
warmth.
and trap warmth.
And here's the
Pirates
trick.
used
When they
heated
got
cannonballs
wet,
as mobile
pirates
heat
didn't
sources.
rip their clothes off
They
and
wrapped
freeze.
these cannonballs
No,
in thick cloth to
they
keep
needed
warm
to
during
wring out
cold
their
nights
wet
at sea.
clothes instead of
Take this
completely
fur, lad.
shedding them.
It's dear
Because
coin,
even
but it'll
dead
keep
wool
the
was
frost
better
from your
than nothing.
bones.
As for
We share
those
what we
leather
have to
coats
survive
and
this
oil
cold.
clothes, well, let's just say they weren't built for fashion. They were built for survival. But let's get something straight. Pirates didn't look stylish in these layers.
To combat the cold and
probably
maintain
looked like
fitness,
oversized
the crew
marshmallows
engaged
stumbling
in
around the
strenuous
truck. But you know
routines.
what? They
This
were
vigorous
alive,
activity
and that's
was
more than you can say for someone
To
trying
combat
brave
the biting cold,
without
pirates
proper clothing.
rotated night
Now,
watch
a little
shifts
bit of
in strict
pirate wisdom for
15-minute
you.
intervals.
There's no bad weather,
This kept the crew
only
active.
bad
The
Not
cold
sure
was
if that's
as
the exact
dangerous
phrase
as the
they
Royal
used,
Navy.
but if it wasn't,
Shipping ice and
pirates
hauling
knew that
frozen
staying
ropes
alive
was
wasn't
the only...
just
While
about
it seemed
fighting
like a chore,
sometimes.
this
It
hard
about
labor was
surviving
crucial.
the elements.
It kept the
In
pirates
those
warm
layers,
by
they
driving
were
blood
like a
flow to their
well-crafted
hands and
defense
feet.
strategy against the cold, just as much as their
To survive
cannons
the
were a
freezing
defense
conditions,
strategy
pirates
against
relied
enemy
on
ships.
strenuous
And here's
activity,
something for you to chew
climbing
on.
the ropes
Did you
and
know that
even
humans actually lose up to 25% of their body heat through their heads? No wonder pirates were so keen on protecting their body. We all know the pirate image.
Active
those
survival was
tricorn
key.
hats, right?
These pirates
You
kept
probably
moving
think
to
they were
stay
all
warm
about
in the
looking
icy
cool,
conditions,
but no,
a tactic
no,
mirrored by
different.
modern...
Those hats were designed to
In
do
these
more than
freezing
top off their
waters,
outfit.
physical
They brought
exertion
wind
was
channel
life-saving.
rain away from their
The heat
faces and
generated
necks,
from hoisting
which was
sail.
This
crucial
ain't just
when those
sport,
storm
lads.
clouds rolled in.
Every muscle
Underneath
tense,
those
every
hats,
knife thrown
pirates
keeps the
would
blood
wear
flowing
snub
against
caps
the
or
ice.
bandanas
It's
to
how
cover
we
their ears
survive.
and retain warmth.
It's a little
because if
known
your head
fact
gets
that
cold,
pirates
you're
use
basically
vigorous
done for.
dancing to
Keeping
stay
your head
warm and
warm
survive
is
the
as
bitter
important as
cold.
keeping your hands and feet warm. Cold hats don't survive, and pirates
Keep
do.
moving, lads,
So
or
those
the
hats
frost will
weren't
claim
just for
ye.
show, they were a life-saving piece of gear. Now,
We
let's
eat
pivot
not just to
something
survive,
a
but
little
for
more personal,
warmth.
shall we?
These peppers
The
and the
thing
salted
pirates
meat,
hoarded
they
more than
generate the
treasure
heat we
was
need
salt.
against the
I'm
cold
not even
sea.
kidding.
As the
In one
temperatures
account of a
dropped, the
pirate
capsin
ship,
in the
the
peppers
first thing
stimulated
they
their
looted
circulation,
wasn't gold or
creating an
silver,
internal
it was
warmth
dry
essential
woolen
for
socks from
survival
the
on the
captain's
cold
quarters.
seas.
I mean,
Pirates ate
socks.
salted meat
It just
for
goes
high
to show
protein.
how valuable those
This
little
helped
things
them burn
were. Pirates
calories
knew
and
that if
stay
their feet
warm in the
froze,
harsh
they
climate.
weren't going anywhere.
Though
They
dry
wore
and
multiple
bland,
layers,
ship
stuffed them with
biscuits were
straw
dense
or
with
rags,
carbohydrates,
whatever it
providing the
took to make sure
slow-burning
their feet
energy
stayed
crucial
warm.
for...
Careful,
Sounds
it's
like a
hot.
silly little thing.
Ah, that's
The
good.
socks were as
Nothing
precious
like
as
ginger
gold
tea to
when it
keep
came
you
to
from
surviving
freezing.
on the cold seas. But let's be real for a second.
Resourcefulness
Pirates
was
weren't
key to
exactly
survival.
fashion icons.
By wrapping scraps
more
in
about
cloth and holding them
functionality.
close,
They didn't
they
care if
utilized
they
their
were
own
wearing
body
the same
heat to
wool
warm the
coat
meager
from a
rations.
British Navy
Pirates were
officer
survival
or
experts,
mismatched boots
with a
from
practical
captured
approach to
merchant
food,
ship. As
clothing,
long as it
and
kept
staying
them warm,
active to
it was
survive
fair game.
extreme
And I
cold.
think that's the real
They are
pirate spirit,
already
don't
broken.
you?
Now, take the ship.
Now that we've
Aye,
covered how
Captain.
pirates decked
No
themselves out to battle the cold, let's talk about that.
To combat
You know,
the cold sea
part
air,
of the body
pirates
that most
engaged
people
in
would
vigorous
think to keep
sparring.
warm lasts
These
after
mock
all
battles
is
weren't
just
just
a
for
small,
warmth, they also
hard thing
ensured
on
the
top,
crew stayed fit
right?
and battle ready.
Well, pirates knew better. I mean, think about it. If you lose heat through your head, you're losing a quarter of your body heat. That's a big deal when you are out at sea in freezing conditions with no cozy blankets to wrap yourself in. So, the head, for pirates, wasn't just a place for eye patches and wild hair, it was a survival tool. Now, we all picture pirates sporting those classic tricorn hats, right? You know, the ones with the giant, flashy brims that look like they've been plucked straight from a fashion magazine. But here's the twist. Those hats weren't about style, they were about function. The broad brims helped keep rain and wind from blasting them in the face while they were out on deck. Think about it. If you're out there in the middle of a storm, getting drenched every time a wave crashes over the side, the last thing you need is to have water dripping down your neck. The tricorn hat acted as a shield against the weather, but it didn't stop there. Underneath these hats, pirates wore snug, close-fitting caps or bandanas to keep their ears warm. You see, the ears are one of the first places to feel the cold, and you can bet that if your ears get frostbitten, you're in trouble. Pirates weren't just rocking bandanas because they were cool. Those bandanas were practical, covering the ears and keeping the warmth inside. Because, believe it or not, humans lose up to 25% of their body heat through their hats. So keeping your head and ears covered wasn't a fashion statement, it was life-saving wisdom. In the cold, your head is everything. A pirate's survival didn't just depend on a sturdy ship and a good sword. It depended on keeping their noggin warm. You know what's wild? That old age wisdom about cold weather survival still holds true today. You might have heard the saying, keep your head warm and your body will follow. Seems like something your grandma would say, but it actually has roots in science. We lose so much body heat from our heads that it can make you feel like you're freezing even when the rest of you is bundled up. That's why pirates were so obsessed with headgear. It wasn't a vanity thing. It was survival. But don't think that their choices were all about staying practical. Oh no, pirates had a flair for the dramatic after all. They were pirates. So, while practicality was the main focus, the style element never completely left the picture. Those tricorn hats, they made a statement. They were the signature look of a pirate, blending function and a bit of flair, even if it was born from necessity. And let's face it, if you're going to be sailing around, stealing treasure, and getting into sword fights, you might as well look the part, right? You can't have a pirate without the hat, besides, it kept the rain off. Speaking of which, here's a quirky little fact I found while researching. Pirates were actually the origin of the Jolly Roger flag. That skull and crossbones is not just an intimidating symbol, it was actually a form of psychological warfare. Pirates would fly that flag to strike fear into merchant ships before they even had to fight. If a ship saw that flag coming, they knew they were about to be boarded. It's kind of like the original version of Don't Mess With Me, except they were messengers of doom on a much grander scale. But back to the head, pirates knew that warmth was crucial, and they made sure to protect their ears, faces, and necks. These practical and somewhat stylish pieces of clothing weren't just for looks, they were one of the best defenses against the freezing, harsh cold of the open sea. And, ultimately, the cold would have claimed many more pirates if they hadn't had these protective measures. Those little bandanas, tricorn hats, and woolen caps, they could very well have saved their lives. Let's talk about something you probably never imagined could be so valuable. Socks. Yes, socks. You might picture pirates raiding ships for treasure, but let me tell you, some of them cared more about socks than gold. And it's not just because they were fashion conscious or had a thing for warm feet, although I wouldn't put it past them. No. Socks were one of the most critical pieces of gear pirates had to keep warm in freezing conditions. The importance of socks can't be overstated. Pirates knew that once their feet got cold, there was no going back. A pair of frozen toes could easily make you useless on deck. So, they prioritized keeping their feet dry and warm above almost anything else. The thing about woolen socks, even when they got wet, they still kept a good chunk of their insulating power. I'm talking 60% of it, which, in the pirate world, was a godsend. And when it came to survival, pirates didn't hesitate to hoard as many socks as they could get their hands on. Imagine raiding a ship and the first thing you're after isn't the gold or the rum, it's dry socks. Sounds wild, right? But in a pirate's world, it made perfect sense. In fact, there's a great story from 1718 off the coast of Cuba that perfectly illustrates how vital socks were. During this particular raid, the pirates didn't even bother with jewelry or coins. Nope, they made a beeline for the captain's quarters and snatched up the driest, wooliest socks they could find. There's something deeply fascinating about this. I mean, socks were so important to pirates that they would specifically divide their loot in the ship's articles, and socks often ranked high on that list. But the obsession with socks wasn't just about comfort. The cold seas would freeze pirates' feet in no time, especially when they were standing watch or working in freezing temperatures. Socks were a lifeline for staying functional on deck. Not to mention they were a huge part of avoiding frostbite. They'd even get creative to make sure their feet stay warm. Some pirates would wear multiple pairs of socks, stacking them up to create extra insulation. Others would stuff their socks with rags or straw to pad them out. Whatever worked, right? When you're at sea and frostbite is lurking, you do whatever you can to stay alive. There's a quirky little tidbit I found in the pirate journals too. During one particularly cold spell, pirates even had to get creative about how they dried their socks. Since drying them on deck in the wind wasn't an option, they strung makeshift clotheslines below deck, where the socks could dry without being blown away. And it wasn't just a few socks that were drying, they often needed to dry multiple pairs at once. It's funny to think that in the middle of a pirate battle or a treacherous voyage, their greatest concern could be keeping their feet warm, but it was true. A pirate without socks in the cold, that's a pirate who might not make it through the night. Old age wisdom teaches us that we must keep our feet under us to keep going. That's the kind of advice pirates knew all too well. If their feet froze, their ability to fight, steer the ship, or even climb the rigging would be compromised. In the freezing, wet conditions of the sea, socks were not just accessories, they were survival gear. So imagine this, you're a pirate, freezing your butt off in the middle of a storm, and you realize the thing keeping you going is something as simple as socks. Sounds absurd, right? But it's true. Those woolen wonders were the difference between staying active and getting incapacitated. The next time you're running around in a pair of cozy wool socks, just remember, they're not just for comfort, they're a pirate's secret weapon. It's also worth noting that socks weren't just something pirates hoarded, they were something they fiercely defended. If they managed to find extra pairs, you bet they guarded them like treasure. And for the pirates who came across particularly luxurious socks, well, they were treated like precious gems. It's wild to think about the power socks held over the pirates, but in their world, it made perfect sense. Now, Let's dive into the pirate treasure chest of clothing. And no, I'm not talking about gold coins or precious jewels. I'm talking about something far more valuable in their battle against the cold: naval uniforms. Pirates, being the opportunists they were, knew that in order to survive those frigid nights at sea, they had to think beyond their usual ragtag outfits. When pirates captured enemy ships, they didn't just loot for wealth, they looted for warmth. And the military's wool and leather garments were the perfect solution. Pirates weren't ones to care much for decorations or the pomp and circumstance of naval uniforms. They weren't bothered by the fancy epaulets or the shiny buttons. No, they wanted practical clothing. And that meant they'd raid naval and army ships for thick wool coats, boots, and leather gear. The British Royal Navy, with their famous wool coats, were often prime targets. These uniforms were built for durability and protection against the elements, things the average pirate garb just couldn't compete with. Now, picture this for a second. You're a pirate, probably freezing your tail off in the middle of the North Atlantic. Suddenly, you come across a British naval ship. It's not just about the gold and silver, no. The real treasure is those thick woolen coats hanging in the captain's quarters. Pirates would scoop up these coats for one reason and one reason only: warmth. These woolen garments weren't just thick, they were waterproof too. And in the cold, wet environment of the sea, that's exactly the kind of gear you need to stay alive. What's interesting is how pirates were a bit of a mismatched fashion show when they raided these ships. Imagine a pirate walking around deck wearing a mix of clothes from different navies. You might see one sporting a British officer's coat, another with French boots, and yet another with Dutch leather gloves. These weren't fashion statements. They were signs of survival. Pirates didn't care that they were mismatched. They cared that they were warm. The wool from one navy's coat and the leather from another might have been a weird combination, but it was an outfit that would keep them alive. Here's an academic thought to throw your way. Did you know that survival experts argue that adaptability is one of the key traits that keeps a species or individual alive? Pirates were masters of adaptability, and that skill extended to their clothing. They weren't picky about where their clothes came from as long as they were functional. Whether it was a coat from a Royal Navy officer or boots from a captured merchant ship, pirates repurposed whatever they could find to stay warm. And the repurposing didn't stop there. Pirates also had a way of making do with what was on hand. If they couldn't get their hands on military gear, they'd use whatever clothing they had in creative ways. A simple wool blanket, for example, could be turned into a cloak. Old sails could be cut up and sewn into coats or hoods. And if the ship's cook had any scraps of cloth, they might turn them into mittens or scarves. Pirates were resourceful, everything had potential, and nothing went to waste. Pirates weren't the kind of people to throw out clothing just because it was worn out. No, they patched it up, repurposed it, and wore it until it couldn't be used anymore. And let's not forget that those coats and uniforms weren't just about warmth, they also had a psychological benefit. If you were a pirate boarding an enemy ship, seeing a pirate in a high-quality military coat might make them second-guess their chances of survival. The psychological warfare of pirates was just as crucial as their physical prowess. You might be thinking, what does this have to do with modern times? Well, let me tell you, it's an important reminder about the value of resourcefulness. Sure, today we have endless options for winter gear, but we can all take a page from the pirate's book. Adaptability and creativity can make a huge difference in difficult situations. Maybe you won't be raiding ships for woolen coats, but learning how to make do with what you have, whether it's a thick jacket or layering up, can go a long way when the cold hits. Pirates had a knack for using everything they could find to survive. Military uniforms and captured clothing weren't just prizes to be stashed away, they were the very clothing that would keep them alive in the freezing sea. Those mismatched outfits were symbols of ingenuity and resourcefulness, qualities pirates relied on to make it through the harshest conditions. And in a world where survival was never guaranteed, those coats and boots, they were worth their weight in gold. Alright, we've covered clothing, socks, and even raiding military ships for woolen treasures. But let's talk about one of the most critical and often overlooked strategies pirates use to survive the cold: sharing, body heat. Imagine being on a pirate ship in the dead of winter, braving freezing winds and relentless waves, and knowing that if you can't keep your crew warm, it's not just your treasure that's at risk, it's your survival. Pirates had to get creative with how they kept warm, and that meant coming together, quite literally. When the cold weather hit, pirates didn't just throw on another coat or hope for the best. No, they knew that in order to survive, they had to huddle together for warmth. Pirates would find shelter spots on the ship, away from the wind and rain, and crowd together, sharing body heat in a makeshift human furnace. And this wasn't just for comfort, it was a survival tactic. Hypothermia was a very real threat, and the colder it got, the less energy pirates had to fight off the chill. If they didn't keep warm, they wouldn't be able to defend themselves, steer the ship, or even haul in their treasure. It sounds pretty desperate, right? But that's how critical warmth was. In the world of cannons and swords, the simplest survival trick of all might have been the most effective. Pirates would huddle together in groups, their faces grim, their hands cold, but their bodies generating heat that might save them from freezing to death. In a place like that, every pirate counted. If one member of the crew couldn't handle the cold, the entire ship could be at risk. So no pirate was left to freeze alone. And the creative solutions didn't end there. If it was particularly cold, pirates had a trick they would use to create warmth on their own. They'd take heated cannonballs, yes, you heard that right, and wrap them in cloth to serve as mobile heat sources. Picture it. You've just survived the battle, and now you're wrapping a hot cannonball in rags to help you stay warm while you try to get some sleep. That's not something you see in your average survival guide, but it worked. Those cannonballs, heated in the ship's galley, would radiate warmth throughout the night, keeping the pirates just warm enough to make it through to the next day. Sometimes, captains even allowed the crew to use blankets and furs that would normally be saved for trade. And while I can't imagine they were particularly thrilled about sharing precious furs, it was either that or risk losing the entire crew to the cold. In a way, those furs were like gold. They were the kind of luxury that made all the difference when survival was on the line. Pirates also knew that body heat wasn't always enough, so they would go beyond just huddling together. There was a clever use of the ship's layout to help keep them warm. Ships often had certain areas, like below deck or near the galley, that would retain heat better than the open deck. Pirates knew where those warm zones were, and they'd rotate sleeping positions accordingly, ensuring that no one was left to freeze in the most exposed spots. If they had to, they'd even sleep in shifts, so the colder parts of the ship were always occupied by someone who could help keep the warmth circulating. Now, here's a quirky little fact for you. This technique of huddling together for warmth has actually been studied in modern survival situations. It's called the huddle effect. And it turns out that sharing body heat can increase the perceived temperature by as much as 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Not bad, right? The pirates were way ahead of the curve in that respect. They didn't need a fancy study to know that close contact could make the difference between life and death. But despite all these tricks, sometimes the cold was just too much to bear. So pirates would also use another smart survival tactic, utilizing hot drinks. Now, I know what you're thinking. A nice cup of tea won't save you from freezing to death. But hear me out. Pirates often brewed rough, homemade teas, using whatever herbs or plants they could scavenge or trade for. These hot beverages were a simple but effective way to generate some internal heat. They didn't have insulated mugs like we do today, so they would hold their steaming cups with their cold hands, absorbing the warmth directly through their palms. At this point, you might be wondering, how did they manage to get any sleep with all this commotion? Well, pirates were nothing if not inventive. When they needed rest, they'd perform vigorous exercises right before bed. A few push-ups, some squats, or even a short round of arm swings would help get the blood flowing and keep their body heat up. They also developed routines to stay warm on night watch, performing silent exercises every quarter hour. This wasn't just about staying awake, it was about survival. If you're standing on deck for hours in the freezing cold, you're gonna need to keep moving to survive. So, those pirate calisthenics weren't just for fun, they were the key to staying warm and alert. There's also this little tidbit about pirate ships that's worth mentioning. Their cramped quarters actually helped them stay warmer. Yes, the close quarters that everyone complains about were a bit of an advantage when it came to keeping the crew alive. It's the classic case of less space, more body heat. So, no matter how much pirates bickered about sharing space, in the end, it helped them survive. In a way, the pirate crew was a living, breathing organism. They needed each other not just for plundering, but for staying alive. In the most desperate of times, survival was all about sharing heat, staying active, and never letting the cold beat them. They were resourceful, adaptive, and incredibly clever when it came to staying warm, and it was this ingenuity that kept them alive through some of the harshest conditions the sea could throw at them. We've talked about clothes, socks, and sharing body heat, but there's one more piece to the cold weather survival puzzle that pirates mastered: food and drink. And let's be 10 honest pirates knew how to make every meal count. On those long, frigid nights at sea, the food they ate wasn't just about satisfying hunger. It was about keeping the internal furnace burning. When you are out on the open sea, with waves crashing over you and temperatures plummeting, you need food that will help you generate heat and stay active. Let's start with the spicy stuff. Hot peppers were a treasure for pirates, but not for the reasons you might think. While we associate peppers with adding flavor to meals, pirates knew that the capsaicin in hot peppers caused a physical reaction in the body. It triggered an increase in blood flow, which temporarily raised body temperature. This wasn't just a myth, they actually used hot peppers strategically to keep warm. During cold voyages, the ship's cook would ration the hottest peppers for the coldest nights. That's right, pirates used their food as a form of personal heating system. It wasn't about the taste, it was about survival. A bite of fiery heat could mean the difference between shivering through the night and being able to survive another freezing wash. But let's not forget about salted meats. These were a pirate staple, not just because they were easy to preserve, but because they served a dual purpose. The high protein content of salted beef, pork, or fish required more energy to digest. And as any biologist will tell you, digesting food burns calories and generates heat, so pirates ate more salted meats during the cold months, ensuring they had enough fuel to stay warm. It's like having a built-in heater, just add meat, chew, and burn calories to stay warm. It might not have been gourmet dining, but it was the kind of food that kept pirates alive in harsh conditions. Now, speaking of food staples, let's talk about ship biscuits. If you've ever eaten one, you know they're about as appetizing as a brick. They were dense, hard, and tough to chew. But there's something to be said for their durability. Ship biscuits were packed with carbohydrates, which provided slow-burning energy. That's the kind of fuel pirates needed to endure long cold watches. They weren't exactly munching on them for flavor, but those hard biscuits gave pirates sustained energy for hours, which was critical when you are stuck on deck in freezing temperatures. Here's a fun fact to lighten the mood. While pirates might have enjoyed their hearty meals, the ship's food storage was often a breeding ground for pests. Rats, cockroaches, and even weevils had a field day with the food stores. So while the pirates were trying to stay warm, they were also battling these little invaders who had no problem getting cozy with the food. It wasn't just the cold they had to worry about, it was also the gnawing, crawling creatures that would have happily shared their bread and biscuits. But let's shift gears for a minute, let's talk about rum. Now, we all know the famous pirate trope, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. But here's the thing. While a swig of rum might feel warm going down, it actually has the opposite effect on your body. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, which increases blood flow to the skin, causing heat to escape. So while pirates might have thought a shot of rum would warm them up, the truth is, it actually made them colder. A pirate captain, knowing this, would water down the rum during the colder months, keeping the crew from getting that false sense of warmth and reducing the risk of them freezing. It's a pretty clever move, considering how much rum pirates likely consumed. But despite the myth, alcohol wasn't the pirates' go-to source of warmth. Instead, pirates relied on hot drinks, especially herbal teas. It wasn't the most luxurious option, but it worked. Pirates would brew whatever herbs and plants they could scavenge or trade for, creating rough, homemade teas that provided real warmth. They didn't have fancy insulated mugs or thermoses to keep their drinks hot, so they cradled rough wooden cups or mugs in their cold, numb hands, letting the heat seep in. When you're freezing on a pirate ship, those little comforts matter. Those hot drinks weren't just a treat, they were a lifeline. They gave pirates that internal warmth, allowing them to endure the cold and stay functional for just a little longer. It's also worth noting that pirates were masters of making do with what they had. When they couldn't brew tea, they'd take food scraps and wrap them in cloth to tuck them inside their clothes, using their body heat to warm up the meals. They even warmed metal spoons by the fire before dipping them into cold food, creating tiny pockets of warmth to make the food less unpleasant. If that doesn't scream resourceful, I don't know what does. Pirates didn't have the luxury of modern kitchen gadgets or heating systems, so they had to get creative to make every bite and sip count. So, while we might think of pirates as living off rum and treasure, the reality was much more practical and a lot more focused on staying alive. Hot peppers, salted meats, ship biscuits, and herbal teas weren't just part of their diet, they were part of their strategy for survival. Pirates knew how to use what they had to keep their bodies warm, and they did it with a kind of creativity that will make even the most seasoned survival expert proud. We've covered how pirates survived by layering clothing, sharing body heat, and fueling their bodies with hearty meals. But the real secret to their survival in the freezing cold wasn't just what they wore or ate, it was how they moved. Pirates were masters of adapting to their environment. And in the brutal cold, staying active was just as important as anything else they did. Imagine being on a pirate ship, miles from land, the ocean freezing, and the wind biting at your skin. You'll be on deck for hours, your teeth chattering, your fingers stiff with cold. What do? Well, if you're a pirate, you keep moving. Pirates knew that a still body in the cold was a dead body. The trick was to stay active, even when it seemed like every muscle in your body was frozen solid. One of the best ways pirates kept warm was through physical labor. Hoisting sails, adjusting the rigging, or scrubbing the deck were all vital tasks on a pirate ship. But there were also excellent ways to generate heat. Pirates weren't about to stand idly by while the ship sailed through cold waters. They were constantly in motion, even when the tasks didn't require it. Every time the sails went up or down, pirates were working muscles that kept their blood flowing and their bodies warm. But don't be fooled. It wasn't just about getting the job done, it was about making sure no one stopped moving long enough to freeze. Sometimes, in the coldest months, pirates would even perform unnecessary sail changes. You heard me right. They'd raise and lower sails multiple times, not because they needed to, but simply to keep the crew moving. A captain might say, "Hoist the main sail." No, wait, lower it again. Never mind, hoist it one more time. It wasn't for tactical advantage or a change in weather, it was because the crew needed to stay warm. Imagine being a pirate and realizing that the captain wasn't indecisive. He was just trying to keep you from freezing to death. It might have been a little annoying, but hey, it worked. Then there's deck scrubbing. Now, I know you're probably thinking of that old-timey punishment where pirates had to scrub the deck as some kind of chore, but during the cold months, scrubbing had a new purpose. It kept the crew moving. Pirates would spend time scrubbing the deck, bending down, and stretching. All that movement helped get the blood flowing to their extremities, fingers, toes, ears, the parts of the body that freeze the fastest. It might have been a punishment or a routine job during the warmer months, but in the winter, scrubbing the deck could have been the difference between surviving and freezing to death. Let me give you another fun fact. It wasn't just scrubbing that kept pirates in shape, it was climbing the ropes. Yes, those very ropes that control the sails and rigging were a source of warmth for pirates. Climbing those ropes required full body movement, engaging every muscle in your body, which meant the crew was burning calories and generating heat with every climb. I bet you didn't think pirate ropes could double as a fitness routine, but they absolutely did. If you ever find yourself on a pirate ship, just know that climbing those ropes isn't just for tactical purposes. It's also one of the best ways to keep warm in a freezing storm. Now, let's talk about the night watch. If you were the poor soul assigned to the crow's nest or standing lookout in the dead of winter, I imagine it will feel like the cold was trying to eat you alive. But pirates didn't just stand there and shiver, they had a system. Those on watch would rotate in quick 15-minute shifts. The reason? They weren't just worried about watching for enemy ships or land. They knew that standing still in the cold for hours would kill them faster than a cannonball. So, They'd rotate positions, keeping the shifts short, but efficient. Each pirate would warm up their frozen limbs, move around, and then pass the torch to the next crew member. It was a survival tactic disguised as good pirate practice. And it worked. Here's an interesting survival tip. Research actually shows that a moving body is a warm body. Scientists have studied how physical movement generates heat in cold conditions, and guess what? Pirates figured that out long before modern science had an explanation for it. Pirates were essentially doing what we now call active survival, when they stayed in constant motion. Whether it was raising sails, scrubbing decks, or climbing ropes, they were getting their bodies moving to stay alive. But it wasn't just physical labor that kept pirates active, it was combat training. Yes, even in the middle of winter, pirates would practice their sword fighting and sparring. Combat might seem like it's all about aggression, but in these harsh conditions, it was also about keeping warm. Pirates would engage in mock sword fights or practice throwing knives, anything to keep their muscles engaged and their blood pumping. Some accounts even mention that during the coldest months, pirate ships would hold impromptu knife-throwing competitions. It wasn't about honing skills for an upcoming battle, it was about making sure the crew didn't freeze in place. Let's add another bit of trivia to the mix. During particularly intense winter months, pirates would even have dance sessions. Yes, I'm serious. They'd bust out sea shanties and stomp their feet in rhythmic dances to keep the warmth flowing. You might not think of pirates as dancers, but when you're trying to stay alive in frigid temperatures, a little bit of dancing might just be the thing to save your life. So, when you think about pirates, remember this. It wasn't just their treasure or their ships that made them survivors. It was their ability to adapt to the cold, keep moving, and make sure they stayed active no matter what. Pirates were masters at staying warm through motion, whether it was through labor, training, or even dancing. They knew that in the cold, survival depended on constant action, and if they hadn't figured that out, they wouldn't have lived long enough to tell their tales.